Morning, everyone. The Joint Legislative Audit Committee will now come to order. Sabrina, will you please call the roll?
Chair Caruso.
Here.
Vice Chair Pizzo. Here. Representatives Benjamin. Senator Broder. Here. Senator Davis. Here. Senator DeSegli, excuse. Representative Gossip Seidman.
Here.
Representative Hart.
Here.
Representative Plakin. Senator Simon. Here. Representative Yarkowski. Here. Quorum is present, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much, and welcome members, senators. If anybody wishes to speak on any items, please fill out an appearance card and hand it to staff. I want to thank Sabrina for helping us today. She's on loan from the House Health and Human Services Committee, and I'd like to welcome two new members, Representative Plakin and Representative Yarkowski. And I understand Representative Plakin's running a couple minutes late. So, Representative Yarkowski, would you like to say a few words, introduce yourself?
Thank you, Chair. Taylor Yarkowski. I represent District 25, which is Northwest Orlando, South Lake County specifically. And it's an honor to sit on this committee. Thanks for having me. Look forward to working with you all.
We're excited to have you here, Representative, and look forward to your input. Today, our first item on the agenda is a request from Senator Pizzo for an audit of the city of North Miami Beach. Senator Pizzo, you may present your request.
Folks, you're not imagining it. It's not deja vu, but the end of last session, I had requested this committee to perform an operational audit or direct the Auditor General to do so. I'm just asking, we had some conversations and all that stuff, but I'm just asking to re-up that same request from last year. Happy to take any questions. I don't think there should be.
Are there any questions for the senator? Is there any members of the public that wish to speak? Senator Pizzo, you are recognized to close.
There's nobody here, not for a lack of interest, but I had met with the city at a commission meeting. I've spoken to people individually, from lobbyists to commissioners, so no one is going to be unfairly surprised by this. And I know they're watching back home, so I've just asked that we go ahead and approve what we intended to request last session.
Thank you. Chair recognizes Representative Hart for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move that the committee direct the Auditor General to perform an operational audit of the city of North Miami Beach. The Auditor General, pursuant her authority, shall finalize the scope of the audit during the course of the audit, providing that the audit-related concerns of Senator Pizzo are considered.
Are there any questions? Any debate? Sabrina, will you please call the roll?
Representatives Benjamin. Senator Broder. Davis. Senator DeSegli, excused. Representatives Gossip Seidman.
Yes.
Representative Hart.
Yes.
Senator Simon. Representative Plakin.
Yes.
Representative Yarkowski. Yes. Vice Chair Pizzo. Yes. Chair Caruso.
Yes.
10 yeas, 0 nays.
Okay, the motion is adopted. The next item on the agenda is a continuation of our February 23rd meeting when we discussed findings reported by the Auditor General with regard to the City of Gainesville's operational audit report. Our primary concerns were the city's $1.7 billion of debt related to the GRU and the transfer of funds from the GRU, the city's utilities, to the city's general fund. These transfers appeared to be based on the needs or wants of the City Commission without regard to sustainability of the GRU. At the time, the City Commission served as the governing board for both the city and the GRU. Since then, the legislature passed and the governor signed HB 1645, which transferred the governing board of the GRU from the City Commission to a 5-member governing board appointed by the governor. The Gainesville Regional Utilities Authority held its first meeting on October 4th. To begin, we're going to have a presentation of the Auditor General's follow-up audit for the City of Gainesville. During our February meeting, we heard a presentation of the Auditor General's initial operational audit of the city. That audit was released January 2022. Since our meeting, as required by law, the Auditor General staff has performed procedures to determine the extent to which the city has corrected the 18 findings originally reported. The audit manager, Derek Noonan, will give the presentation. And Mr. Noonan, you are recognized. Your microphone working?
Okay, the light's on, so I guess it's working now. Okay, thank you for this opportunity to present it. I just want to start off by saying we went in there before the 18-month time frame. The city staff was very accommodative of that. And then when as this meeting drew closer, they were also helped us push it across the finish line. So they were very cooperative. Anyway, I can't find it on the computer, so I'll be doing it old school. There should be in the packet. So it's report number 2024-033, just got released within the last few days. Follow up on Art Report 2022-087. At the direction of the Joint Legislative Audit Committee, we performed the original audit, released it in January 2022. Pursuant to Section 1145 Florida statutes, we went back and performed follow-up procedures, and we released the report on October 12th, which was last Thursday. The summary of the results is that the city had corrected 8 findings, findings 2, 3, 8, 11, 12, 14, 16, and 18. Had partially corrected 6 findings, findings 1, 9, 10, 13, and 17, and no occasion to correct 4 findings, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And no occasion to correct is basically our version of not applicable. So for the corrected audit findings, finding 2 had to do with the transfers to the general fund. The city has established a methodology for calculating the general service contribution, GSC, formerly known as the general fund transfer. It's the GSC is budgeted to fluctuate between $15.3 million and $17.1 million for the 2023-24 fiscal year, going through the 2032-33 fiscal year, which is down from the $36 million and change that it was previously. Finding 3, the indirect cost recovery. The city has restored the $1.3 million of indirect cost overcharges we noted in our original report. And going forward is going to, if it is going to have a look back period, so there's not going to be any reason to do any reconciliations. Finding 8, use of nonprofit organizations for the Reichert House Youth Academy. The city, as we're going to mention soon, they're not administering or contributing to that program any longer, and they made a management decision not to pursue further research of some of the question payments we noted from the first report. Finding 11 had to do with transparency of golf course operations, and we know the city personnel periodically presents budget to actual golf course operations reports to the City Commission. Finding 12 had to do with the Gainesville Community Reinvestment Area, the GCRA. In June 2023, the City Commission adopted an ordinance to amend previous ordinances relating to the GCRA, requiring that funds held by the GRCA be audited annually by external auditors. Funds may be expended pursuant to the reinvestment plan adopted by the City Commission, and that an annual work plan be annually prepared and submitted to the Alachua Board of County Commissioners. Finding 14 was employee evaluations. We noted that all the city employees we tested for the 21-22 fiscal year received their evaluations timely, and that the results were communicated to the employees. Finding 16, purchasing cards, periodic reviews. We noted the city implemented periodic review procedures. And for finding 18, travel, the GRU enhanced its travel procedures, and our testing disclosed that GRU is complying with those procedures. Now we move on to the partially corrected audit findings. Finding 1, the GRU debt levels. GRU's long-term debt to net position ratio remained at 4.30 as of September 30, 2022, which is unchanged from the original report. In April 2023, the City Commission approved a debt reduction plan to reduce GRU's total debt by approximately $315 million over a 10-year period. Obviously, that's going to be a long-term proposition, so in the near term, it hasn't had an opportunity to change yet. Finding 9, financial statement presentation. The financial statement auditor reported 2 material weaknesses in the city's internal controls over financial reporting for the 2021-22 fiscal year, which was the most recently completed audit, having to do with untimely bank reconciliations and account balances that required significant audit adjustments, with approximately 100 journal entries posted after the trial balance was provided to the auditor. The number of financial statement findings dropped from 6 to 2, and the amount of additional audit costs decreased, and the city can talk more about that, but they have a more stable financial staff, and they're confident that they'll be doing better going forward. Finding 10, budget management. The city established the legal level of control at the departmental level. However, the 21-22 fiscal year audited financial statements presented the budget at the function level and did not include a reconciliation to the department level. So basically, if you were looking at what the city commission approved budget-wise versus the financial statements, it wouldn't be apparent whether they were within budget or not. As of August 2023, budget to actual comparisons were not being periodically presented to the city commission. So that's partial. Finding 13 had to do with employee background screenings. The city performed background checks on applicants, and for applicants with criminal histories, the city attorney documented that there were no objections to hiring them. They adopted a process of rescreening existing employees every 5 years, but had not rescreened some of the employees until June 2023. When we brought it to their attention, they promptly rescreened those employees. Finding 15, selection of debt professionals. The city competitively selected a municipal advisor. However, the city did not competitively select bond counsel, or alternately did not have record reevaluate its ongoing relationship with the bond counsel to document the rationale for not competitively selecting. Finding 17, purchasing card separations. Although timeliness of purchasing card cancellations had improved, some untimely cancellations were noted. Some of the issue here is that the city suspends use of the card before they outright cancel them, but the records aren't capturing the suspension date, so we just didn't have anything to look at. So they're saying they suspended these before they were canceled, but because the date wasn't recorded, we just weren't able to verify some of that. Audit findings with no occasions to correct would be finding 4, Reichert House Youth Program Oversight and Control. Finding 5, use of Reichert House, Inc. to support Reichert House Youth Program operations. Finding 6, oversight of Reichert House, Inc. And finding 7, transparency of Reichert House, Inc. and Reichert House Youth Academy program operations. And the reason these are no occasion to correct is in May 2023, the city ceased administering and funding the program. So it might still be operating out there in some form, but it's in the world of not-for-profits and out of the city's purview at this point. And that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Noonan. Members, any questions? Okay, you're recognized, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Only because I'm trying to get a comparative kind of assessment. The city population is like 145,000, I believe. How many P-card situations were there? Whether not reconciled, not closed out, suspended, but not tracked. But how many P-card incidents were there?
Okay.
I think the last read, they had like 1,500 full-time employees, I think, in the city.
Right. So what we were looking at is the cancellations as far as when they separate employment. So there were 11 city employees, general government employees, 23 GRU employees that separate for city employment. And we know that 2 of the 11 general government P cards were canceled 17 and 24 days, or an average of 21 days after separation. 3 of the GRU P cards were canceled 12 to 19, an average of 15 days after employee separation dates. So those are a lot better dates than what was in the original report. Could still use some enhancement. Again, they were saying that they suspended the cards sooner than that. We just didn't have documentation to hang our hats on with that.
Follow up.
You're recognized.
So if John Jones, not actual John Jones, just hypothetically speaking, John Jones is anticipated to be either terminated or retired or whatever on Friday. The occasion may have been that the card itself was actually suspended, but you're saying 15 days may have passed until they physically got the card or canceled.
Well, until they actually canceled it, right?
But they may have suspended it beforehand.
They are saying that they suspended it more timely. There was just, they're not recording the suspension dates, so we just didn't have anything that we could audit.
Follow up.
Recognize.
Any evidence of transactions on those cards after the end of service date?
We did not see anything, no.
Okay.
Good. Any other questions, members? Okay, I've got a few.
Sure.
And I don't mean to beat on you, but I guess, my concern is you say that 8 findings were corrected. I think 6 findings were partially corrected and 4 really not applicable anymore. And I guess my first question is, how do you go about determining that they are corrected versus partially corrected to not applicable anymore?
Okay, so we start with our recommendation in the original report, and that's our roadmap. So the recommendation says we recommend that they do sometimes one thing, sometimes multiple things, and we basically go through the process and see what they did to address those, how they followed our recommendations. So fully corrected means everything in our recommendation they corrected. Partially corrected means they corrected some of it, but not all of it.
Okay, and am I correct that the 8 findings that were corrected were 2, 3, 8, 11, 12, 14, 16, and 18? I could repeat that.
Yeah, I have to go back and look at that as well. 2, 3, 8, 11, 12, 14, 16, and 18, that's correct.
Okay, perfect. So if we went to finding 2 in your report, and that one has to deal with
The transfers.
GRU transfers to the general fund. It says, and I'll read it from the report, the city had not established a reasonable, consistent methodology to determine the amount of the annual transfer from the GRU to the city's general fund that considers the GRU's long-term ability to pay. You recommended in the previous report that the City Commission adopt and consistently utilize a reasonable and sustainable method to calculate the GFT amount, and that the methodology consider the long-term ability of the GRU to pay. So I see your analysis here, and that the city came up with a method that had some mathematical rationale to it, and it's in the form of a chart that spans 10 years and references amounts to be transferred, projected amounts to be transferred to the city of $15.3 million to $17.1 million. And at the end of the report, you conclude, it appears that the city developed a reasonable, sustainable method to calculate the GSC that considers the long-term ability of the GRU to pay. But how is this the case when the city's long-term analysis of debt reduction did not consider $1.3 billion of capital improvement replacement or the related cost of maintaining existing equipment?
We addressed that in finding 1, which is why we only gave it partially corrected, is that their debt reduction plan didn't incorporate some of these other documents, the capital improvement plan and the integrated resources plan. And they indicated they considered it, they just didn't document it in the body of the debt reduction plan. For purposes of the transfer, what we were trying to do is tie their methodology into some industry best practice or support. We were unable to do that. However, what we did do is we went back to House Bill 1645, which proposes a maximum transfer amount, and it has a formula methodology in there. So they reran the numbers using that, and we compared them to this method they have, and because their current method in this table, in Table 1, is less than what they could theoretically charge under Bill 1645, we concluded that it was reasonable and sustainable because, absent any industry standard that we could hang our hat on, that was, the next most objective criteria is, did it come in under the bill amount?
Okay. Well, with respect to that, since you reference the first finding, which is GRU debt levels, how do you determine that this methodology is sustainable other than just stating that it's less than what 1645 would have allowed?
Well, we have to have an objective criteria to measure it against. So based on the fact that it came in at less than what they would have been able to recoup using that methodology, and also the fact that, it's significantly less than what it was, it seems like it's going to be a lot more reasonable and sustainable than, what they were doing.
But would you agree that the methodology did not consider long-term ability of the GRU to pay? Since it didn't, the long-term ability to pay of the GRU did not consider the $1.3 billion of CIR or the maintenance.
Right. Well, again, we're going off the assumption that the folks that put that formula together in 1645 had something in mind sustainability-wise, and so we went with that.
So I would
now as far. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I would conjecture that it was partially resolved and not completely resolved as corrected, partially corrected versus that number 2 was partially corrected versus completely corrected. That would be since it didn't address the long-term ability of the CRU, of the city, of the GRU to repay its long-term debt.
Right. The only way to know for sure is with the passage of time. So.
Okay. And then going to number 1, the GRU debt levels, you say it's partially corrected.
Mm-hmm.
If the plan in your audit report you write the debt reduction plan did not include in the projected borrowings the IRP related cost to maintain its existing power plants. Additionally, the debt reduction plan did not include capital improvement projects. But then you write, we recommend that GRU management, city commission of record, et cetera, all projected debt borrowings and debt reduction plans so that future debt obligations more accurately are reflected. I'm trying to see how number 1 is partially corrected.
Well, it's partially corrected because in the beginning they had no plan whatsoever. So we recommended they come up with a plan that considers various things. So they put together a plan. So they did something. It doesn't, at least it doesn't document the consideration of the IRP and the CIP. So we couldn't give them a fully corrected. So they took the first step. They've put together a plan. It's just lacking a few elements that we thought should be in it.
So
we gave it a partial.
You would conclude that it's insufficient of a plan.
Correct. If it was fully correct, if we considered the plan fully implement our recommendations, we would have classified as correctly. But they did come up with a plan. It's not quite what we'd hoped for, but it's it gets them part of the way there.
Well, let's see if I can move on to audit finding 10, budget management. The way I read your report is your previous report recommended 3 different things. Recommended the desired legal level of budgetary controls established for city budgets. Now, on this one, you say that it is partially corrected, okay? Correct. So you say the desired first recommendation was at the desired legal level of budgetary controls established for city budgets, and I guess that has to do with reflecting departmental levels.
Correct.
Second, the budgeted expenditures reported on the financial statements accurately reflect the established legal level of budgetary control to enable financial statement users to readily determine whether the resources were expended within budgetary amounts consistent with the city commission. And I'll continue to read. The third thing, budget to actual comparison reports are timely presented to the entire city commission. Then the results of the follow-up procedures, you then go in to say that none of those things were done. And I could go and quote the lines. It says, our review disclosed that the schedule of revenues and budget to actual for the general was presented at the function level rather than the department level. 2, as such, users could not readily determine the city resources were expended properly. And 3, the minutes of the city commission's meetings held during the audit period and did not note any record of such reports were presented to the City Commission. And then you continue, as of August 23rd, 2023, the reports had still not been presented to the City Commission. So I don't understand how we got a partial on that one.
Well, the first bullet was to establish a desired level of budgetary control. And in the first paragraph of the results of follow-up procedures, we noted that in September 2021, they updated their budget policy and they did establish that level of control at the department level. So they met the first bullet. They did not meet the second and third bullet.
Okay.
So it became partial.
Okay. Very good. And then with, and I'm bringing this to an ending here, so bear with me. For findings 4, 5, and 6, I think they all deal with the Reichert program. Yeah, the Reichert House program, 4, 5, 6, and 7. All right. When the money, I understand monies were provided by the city to the program. And was there a contractual arrangement between the city and the program, or they just gave them money?
No, the point of those original findings, the original report, is there were no agreements. There was basically no oversight. And so we basically suggested that they get, oversight and make the operations more transparent. And the city basically just got out of the Reichert House business was their response, which is why it was no occasion to correct. The only one that was partial had to do with finding 8, and that had to do with they had some. So what they did in the original audit is there was some, there wasn't much oversight, so they hired an audit firm to go do these agreed upon procedures engagements, where basically they just made schedules of amounts going in and out of the nonprofits, but because it was agreed upon procedures, non-examination agreement, there was no requirement to come up with a conclusion. So based on those schedules, we saw some payments that it wasn't obvious what the purpose was, and we basically recommended that they follow up on that. So they made, a policy decision that it wouldn't be cost efficient or a good use of staff's time to do that. So they made that, policy determination, and then they were done with Reichert House.
Were you aware when you did the report that the city's new budget included $150,000 in it for a similar program?
We were not.
Okay, very good. Okay, I've got no further questions. Representative Gassett-Seidman, you're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, I wondered, sir, are you aware that after the last meeting when we all worked with you all, that there was a solar, some kind of a solar discussion and move to incorporate new solar energy within the city, within the GRU?
I remember hearing some discussion of that, I believe, during the House Bill 1645 hearing.
Yes, thank you. It was on April 20th, actually, that the GRU is moving toward a major solar contract with a company called Orgis.
Okay.
And I wondered if we have any updated information on that and to what level that adds to your financial standing.
We do not. The follow-up audit was strictly geared towards following up on the findings of the original audit. So at the time of the original audit, the solar agreement wasn't in place and wasn't one of the areas of concern. So no, we did not perform any procedures involving that.
Okay. I wonder if you're aware that this company is held overseas in Belgium and the island of Cyprus?
I was not.
Okay, and my next question is, why would we not work with a company based in Florida and minimally the United States?
I don't know. I don't know if that's. I appreciate the question, but I just don't know if that's for the
Sure. Then my question
auditor
would be,
manager.
could we get some data on this moving forward, and to see how it incorporates in the current standing, and if it puts the city in further position as to problematic finances?
Well, what I would recommend is the city folks are here. You could ask them about it, and also the authority from House Bill 1645 has just been put in place. So how that's going to pan out as far as how they integrate with GRU management and the city commission is a little early to tell at this point. So that might be a good item that they could look into.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Representative Senator Broder.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This may be a larger mechanical issue of previous audits you've been involved in, but as the chair brought up some additional concerns that maybe members of the delegation or others on the committee would have. We've had the audit, we've had the response, we've had the follow-up. What if there are some additional things we'd like to ask the city to do and or penalties that we could enforce? I know we've had discussions about that before, but wanted to see from your perspective in previous audits, have there been times when there's some additional things that we would like to have done, even though we've just done an audit, to follow up on what we're finding?
Mr. Noonan.
Yes, the usual procedures that would go back through the committee for consideration. Again, one of the things that's new is since we've been here last time, and again, it's too early to tell what effect it's going to have, is that authority is in place now, so it might not be a bad idea to direct some queries to them because they're now in the oversight position.
Any follow-up? You good? Representative Plakin, did you have a question? No, not you. Okay. We don't have any motion on the floor yet. Okay. Any other questions? The auditor manager, Representative Yarkowski.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Back to just a quick question to clarify this Riker House issue. You say it's not applicable because they stopped doing business with the Riker organization. Did we look at what the nature of the business before that, and we've ruled out that there was any issue with any of that? They just stopped and we moved forward, or did we look into? I mean, just because they stopped doing it, does that mean what was done was righteous and okay, or have we even looked at all that?
Well, we recommended as part of finding 8 that the city look into that further, and they elected not to do that. So it's at this point, that's it.
Follow up?
I mean, so they're being asked to go look at their own work in that area and see if there's anything problematic? Is that what your recommendation was? Or I mean, that seems a little bit counterintuitive to an audit.
Right, so, I mean, all we could do is look at the records that were there, and there wasn't much in the way of records. We recommended that the city get more records to substantiate some of what the not-for-profit funding was used for. And they didn't do that. So they had a rationale that they just didn't want. It was going to be costly and inefficient use of staff time. And at that point, it's a policy decision, and they made it.
One follow-up, one final.
You recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So it's your position today that you don't know if anything was wrong or right. You have no position on that because pay no attention to the man behind the curtain kind of thing, and we didn't look any further into it.
You recognize.
Right, correct. We request the records and we look at what they give us. We're not a law enforcement organization, so we don't depose or charge anyone with anything. We're just a reporting entity. So we, based on what we looked at in the first audit, some of the stuff in there was inconclusive, and we suggested they do similar to what they did the last time and get the CPA firm to take those agreed upon procedures engagements, go one step further to make a determination as to whether some of those payments were, as for what they were actually used for. And you can ask them more on that. They, the concern was these entities didn't have much in the way of records. They weren't sure what they were going to get. And it wasn't, worth their effort to do it.
Okay. Any other questions, members? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Noonan. We appreciate your indulging our many, many questions here. And Thank you.
Thank you.
You've, we're going to have the mayor. Okay. Next up, I'd like to call on Mayor Harvey Ward, Mayor of Gainesville. In February, Mayor, we asked you, the city needed to take bold action to address the city's financial situation. You and your staff indicated that they would be prepared to present to us these bold plans to address our concerns by October 1st, and that's why we're here today. I see you're joined by others from the city, and if you want to introduce them and anybody else that accompanied you here today, and then you can begin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my name is Harvey Ward. I'm the mayor of the city of Gainesville. Our city manager is here with us, Ms. Cynthia Curry. Mr. Dan Nee, who is our city attorney, is here. Ms. Sue Wong, who is our finance director, is here as well. Mr. Craig Carter, the chair of the new GRU Authority, and Mr. Tony Cunningham, who is the general manager of the utility, are here as well. If you'd like,
Welcome, everybody.
I have a statement that I'm happy to go through, and then certainly happy to answer any questions. And I want to correct is not the right word, but I want to make sure that we state more appropriately some of the things, particularly regarding Reichert House, because I think there's some misunderstanding, and I want to make sure that we're all on the same page with that.
Okay. You can address that after your statement.
Sure. After appearing before you in February, we returned to Gainesville and aggressively leaned into addressing the issues you communicated to us. We heard your concerns and have an update on the advances we've made. First, I want you to know that in the process of this, in the process of making financial corrections, we eliminated 125.5 positions in the community, or in the city of Gainesville, about half of which were currently filled, all of which were budgeted. There were no phantom positions as a part of this. The city manager voluntarily, as a part of this, took a $15,000 pay cut. The city commission rescinded a pay increase that had been authorized by the previous commissions. We took this very seriously. We lowered expenses for every city department except for public safety. We increased police and fire because it was the right thing to do. The city of Gainesville has implemented substantial changes to meet the recommendations laid out in the State Auditor General January 2022 Operational Audit Report. Today, I will share that the 18-month review of our organization shows immediate progressive action on all 18 of the findings, 8 completely corrected, 6 partially corrected, 4 marked as no occasion to correct. In February, you did indeed ask us to take bold action to address the debt level of GRU. On April 13th, the City Commission established a formula for calculating the general fund transfer, now known as the Government Services Contribution. The new methodology was a joint effort between general government and GRU staff, and it lowered the contribution by $19 million, or 55.4% for fiscal year 2024. A related finding for GRU involved the indirect cost recovery methodology the city was using to charge GRU for general government services. We are pleased to report the city has corrected this issue to the satisfaction of the Auditor General. We have refunded past overcharges to GRU, and we will conduct cost allocation studies on an annual ongoing basis forward to accurately measure and charge for the value of services provided to the utility by general government. The operational audit also included questions about the operation of Reichert House Youth Academy, which represented 5 findings related to management and oversight, including financial reporting involving outside agencies. While this program for at-risk youth, founded more than 30 years ago, has done a great deal of good for the community, we determined the best course of action was to discontinue the city's leading role in delivering this type of program. The program was closed May 31st. As a result, 4 of the Reichert House findings were marked as no occasion to correct, and 1 finding was marked as corrected. The third category of findings brought forward by the State Auditor General were about administration and management. One item focused on monitoring and transparency at Ironwood Golf Course. We're happy to report this has been corrected. Our Finance Committee will continue to review budget reports from the golf course each quarter. General government's financial reporting practices also fall into this third group. Although marked as partially corrected, the Department of Financial Services has worked diligently to make improvements in this area over the last 18 months. City Manager Curry, who arrived in November 2021, escalated these financial findings as a critical priority to the Commission. Since that time, General Government has hired a CPA credentialed finance director and controller, 2 senior accountants, an internal control manager, internal control specialist, grant fiscal coordinator, and a financial systems architect. The department has also strengthened operating procedures and increased opportunities for staff training and development. In addition, General Government's annual financial audits are up to date. Progress is shown in the number of outstanding audit findings, which have been reduced from 6 in fiscal year 2020 to 4 in FY21 to 2 in FY22. The fiscal year 22 audit received a clean report with no new findings, and the only 2 remaining findings held over from the 2020 audit have been addressed, but are still showing as partially corrected because the auditor would like to see the results of the 23 external annual audit, which is expected to be finalized March of 24. So we have to wait for the calendar to catch up to be able to give you full report on that. The city continues to make progress on addressing partially completed findings. We also continue to do the day-to-day good work expected by our community. Our fire, police, and public works departments are nationally accredited, and most recently our Department of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs just received reaccreditation with a 100% perfect score on 154 judged standards. This year, the city received the 2023 Downtown Achievement Award of Excellence as well. Like all cities, change is constant, and we continue to lean in to address challenges. We'll address specifically Reichert House. Reichert House had been a department of the city of Gainesville. It had actually worked under Gainesville Police Department for 30-ish years. We reached a conclusion, the city manager reached a conclusion, and recommended to the city commission that we end that program. We believe, and I certainly hope, and I see happening, that the community is willing to take up the slack on that and be a part of leading that. The city will no longer run Reichert House. Reichert House does not exist as of right now. We are not going to do that because, frankly, it's not the kind of thing that is in the normal course of operations for a city our size. We believe it's unwieldy for us to do it. It does good things, it achieves good ends, but it's not the kind of thing that is easy for a city to own and operate. So we don't own and operate it anymore. The finding that you all were discussing involved payments back in 2015 through 2018, I believe, between nonprofits that had been supportive of Reichert House, but not payments to the city. That was an opportunity that frankly would have been, we had chased it for years, and we cannot compel nonprofits giving money to each other or receiving funds to produce records that simply don't exist. So the recommendation from the Auditor General's office was for us to explain that, which we did in a memo from the city attorney, and which, again, under recommendation from the Auditor General's office, the City Commission received that, voted unanimously to receive the city attorney's memo in that regard. I am hopeful that the purposes of Reichert House will continue to be led by the community. We have created a line item of $250,000, not for Reichert House, but for preventative youth services that will be available in a competitive process. There'll have to be RFPs as part of that, and it will not go to Reichert House because Reichert House is no longer there. We don't do Reichert House anymore. We do think that funding those kind of opportunities is a thing that a city should do. We recognize that there is a need for it, and there will be a competitive process to award up to $250,000 this year. That is what that line item is. I'd heard discussion in the public about that, and I wanted to make sure that we corrected that idea. There is no $150,000 or $250,000 line item going to Reichert House. There is a set aside for that kind of community development that we'll see where it goes in a competitive process going forward.
Thank you. Members, any questions? Representative Hart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for your report. You said that these charges that we are talking about, the funding that nobody could quite explain, was 2015 to 2018?
Mr. Chair, I believe those are the accurate numbers.
Thank you. If you're recognized, go ahead.
So, and we were talking about not the city that was administering these dollars, but the actual not-for-profit, Rackers and some other not-for-profits
The question?
were the ones that were passing the funds from one not-for-profit to the other?
Can you confirm that?
Mr. Chair, that is generally correct, yes.
Follow up?
Just one other thing. I'd just like to thank you, though, for allowing that $250,000 to be a line item to help people within the community, especially our youth. And I think that by doing an RFP is the best way to do that, to ensure that there will be accountability. So I thank you for that.
Mayor?
I just said yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Okay. Senator Broder.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate your forthrightness in taking some of these steps. And so, and I apologize, I didn't ask this, but as a business guy, when we talked, as a business guy, you've done all these things to try and correct your spending in terms of you got rid of 185 positions, and you made your poor city manager cut her salary, and all these things. How much total, and you reduced all your departments, save public safety, how much as a percentage or total cash did that end up saving your city?
Mr. Chair. Thank you. So, Senator, the budget actually increased by about $1 million because we needed to increase police and fire as part of ongoing collective bargaining agreements. Each other department took a serious haircut. We lowered fees across the board other than in that. And if I could have our city manager. The 125 positions, 125.5 positions was almost $10 million was the total amount of those.
So, Mr. Chairman, so then you would have, in order to achieve a budget, have to have raised your budget still by greater than 10 million plus.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
You're recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, we raised ad valorem taxes. We went from 5.5 mils to almost 6.5 mils, and we had increase in the value of local property.
Senator.
So, despite all of these, taxes still went drastically up.
You're recognized, Mayor.
Mr. Chair, yes, that is correct. We felt that we needed to do that, again, as directed by members of JLAC back in February, comments from the committee. We followed up on that, and that's what we had to deliver to make sure that we could continue to deliver value to the people of Gainesville.
Anything further? You're good? Representative Hinson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for allowing me to sit in as a guest, as this is my home. I was born and raised and educated. It's a wonderful city. I wouldn't want to live anywhere else. Good. And I also would like to thank the mayor for taking this committee seriously and making some bold moves. I'm very proud of the work that you've done. I'm sad for the citizens of Gainesville that we are losing the services, but we had to do what we had to do. I appreciate you doing that. My greater sadness is for the Reichert House, an at-risk youth program for boys that we've had over 30 years, almost in tears, that you had to close. It's always come under some budget scrutiny. I think you had to do it. I hope we can reimagine Reichert House in a way that will be far more sustainable and more accountable and more transparent, because the work of the Reichert House is still badly needed. We have in the state 2 funding opportunities for you. Yes, sir, I'm going to let them know. One, we had a lot of money we appropriated for a fatherhood initiative that may be accessible to you for future programs, as well as I'm surprised I'm saying this myself, universal voucher program that might be able to reimagine Reichert House as a charter school for at-risk boys. We definitely need it in Gainesville. They need full-time supervision. We have a lot of violence that we're talking about right now. To be able to educate these boys all day would be a wonderful way to reimagine the Reichert House, and I appreciate the opportunity to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Any other questions, members? Senator Davis, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair. And going back to, I think this is for clarity more than anything. So during the chair's comments, he was talking about, and it could have been a mistaken dollar amount. And so this, again, is for clarity. He mentioned a 150,000 program. I'm going back to assume and talking to you, Mayor, and you answer yes or no. Is that the $250,000 that we think was the line item put in for youth services? That's the question I wanted to ask you earlier. Were we getting something confused? Because I didn't understand the $150,000 line item. So for clarity purposes, was that what you were talking about, Chair, versus what the mayor was talking about?
You can clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, that is accurate. Well, I believe that's what you're talking. We do not have a $150,000 Reichert line item. We do have a 250 that's open to an RFP competitive process.
Okay, so my follow-up question will be, is there a line item somewhere for $150,000?
Yeah, you're recognized.
Senator Davis, there is a $150,000 line item for a gun violence program.
Thank you. Senator, Vice Chair.
Thank you. Do you have a police athletic league right now?
Mr. Chair.
You're recognized. Just converse.
We do in fact have one, yes.
Okay, but the Reichert House that if I remember reading correctly, had 60 students or 60 school-age children that it was servicing, as well as 70 on a wait list. You had 15 full-time employees, but that was run and the operation was all entirely through your police department, correct?
Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay, so I'm going to echo everybody else's sentiments. I don't think it's a partisan issue by any means. This is the time and era that we need youth intervention as much as possible. So I think 150 might be a little shy on a population of 145,000 in your city. Another question. I think Mr. Noonan, and if you know this, Mr. Noonan had said that the first meeting of this GRUA was actually October 4th because the 5 appointees from the governor's office was supposed to be effective October 1st?
Sure. Yes, sir, that's correct.
Okay. And is it that 5-member board that will determine rates, fees, operation of all utilities having to do with Gainesville?
Yes, sir, that's what the charter says now.
So this is sort of a rhetorical question. You don't really have purview over how these rates and what the glide path might be back to the city of Gainesville, do you?
Senator, I am Joe ratepayer in that respect.
And would you agree that 1645, I think we're learning today, careful what you wish for, by way of limitation, is limiting some of your purview and authority and ability to maybe even accelerate debt service? If it's not within your control.
Senator, that's certainly possible. It is not within my control. That's correct.
So if there's a question as to the frequency, amount, volume, rapidity, or slowness as to what's going to be contributed from the utility, we should have the 5-member board here to see what their projection or what their contemplation is going forward.
I would say, Mr. Chair, Senator, that I cannot answer questions regarding the utility.
Thank you.
Any other questions, members? I've got a few myself. But, Mayor, if we could just kind of, I got a few questions with regards to the audit report and things that came up. For example, the first one, and you mentioned that GRU debt levels you can't address. It's not your oversight anymore. But I was wondering, you came up with a plan, okay, and how did your plan consider the long-term ability of the GRU to pay? And I only say this because although you're not in control of the GRU, you're requesting monies from the GRU for general funds. And in light of that, how is your plan consider the long-term ability of the GRU to pay when you didn't consider the CIP projects of $1.3 billion, and the is that method sustainable?
Mr. Chair, I would say a couple things. First, going back to when we had the negotiations and the discussions at the commission level and with staff about how to set the general services contribution level and the formula for that, and how we determined how staff helped us determine the repayment plan. We did consider those things. We are also were aware at the time that we had an ongoing IRP process happening, and that to fix numbers to that would be a shot in the dark. We don't know what those numbers would be. It is my understanding that we did consider capital needs going forward within that. But to be more specific, you should talk to Mr. Cunningham, who I know is probably prepared to speak to that. Certainly, he can give you more. I'm careful about speaking to the nuts and bolts of things because I do not want to misspeak, whether that be general government or formally as a GRU board member.
That's fair. But I guess I just don't. I don't see the logic in this plan at all, and I was wondering, what's the rationale behind the plan? This methodology of coming up with this $15.3 to $17.1 million a year.
So I'm going to ask Mr. Cunningham to come up and speak to that because I do not think that it's appropriate for me to speak to GRU issues going forward.
Okay. Well, okay. Sure, you can. You're welcome to come up. If you could just say your name and position and
Absolutely.
would be good.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My name is Tony Cunningham. I am now the CEO GM of the GRU Authority until that new authority appoints a permanent CEO GM. And so, Mr. Chair, to address the question of you want specifically how the formula was calculated or the methodology for the general services contribution?
Yes.
Okay. So what, as the mayor said, basically we had staff from both GRU and general government sit down and look through different ways to look at how to do a methodology or a formula, which was what the request was from the Auditor General. And to put it simply, I'm going to do it real simply, is we kind of looked at it like if you had a private utility come in, what are the expenses they're going to pay? And they're going to pay property taxes and they're going to pay a franchise fee. So they put together a formula that mimics property taxes and franchise fees. And that formula resulted in a payment of $15.3 million, where the previous year it was 34, projected to move down from there. And so that is what we agreed to. Now then what we did from the plan standpoint for the debt reduction is we said every dollar in that difference between those two, what it was going to be and what it is now, we're going to apply that to debt, and we're going to do that for the next 10 years. So every dollar that's the difference, we're going to do that. We're also going to have some cost reductions. We're going to apply that to the debt. And then finally, we're going to have some modest rate increases that had been put in place from 22 to 27. Continue those modest rate increases, and any of the excess reserves generated from that is going to go towards that debt reduction plan. And so that's the plan we put in place. I do want to clarify the point that the Auditor General pointed out was that there was $1.3 billion of capital improvements identified. We did include $954 million of that. So the $1.3 billion, you can kind of think of it as that's what directors were requesting, and the $954 is what the executive team or the general manager said we were going to put in that plan. So that was a kind of a trim from the request. So there was $954 million that is included in it, not the requested 1.3 from the organization. If that clarifies that.
It does, but this table here in the auditor's report, I'm sure you're very familiar with it, with the franchise fee component and the property tax component. You agree it doesn't take into consideration the needs of funds of the GRU. It takes in it's just this is what we want now perspective. It doesn't take into consideration the long-term debt or the ability to pay the long-term debt by the GRU.
So, Mr. Chair, I would agree the formula or the methodology does not. The debt reduction plan does. So the debt reduction plan then takes the result of that and applies all the different parts and pieces that I just described to meet that debt reduction plan. And I can address proactively a little bit. The Auditor General identified that the IRP was not included in that, the results of the IRP. So the Integrated Resource Plan, if everybody is not aware, is a way to plan generation over the next 35 to 40 years. And so we're in the middle of that process, identifying that. So the way that I'm looking at the world with regards to this is that since we don't know what those things are, and we know what's in the debt reduction plan in terms of how much we have planned to expend on the utility, we're kind of restrained by that going forward. So if we go forward and we identify generation needs, we're restrained by the debt reduction plan on what is available there. And so that is why we didn't include it. And then the last part of why we didn't include it, so we didn't know what they were. We're restrained by the plan that was there. And then lastly, we have a new authority. We would need to take those plans to the authority for approval. So we did not want to put something in the plan that was not approved by the authority. And so that is how we're looking at it. You alluded to, we did have our first meeting with the authority. I think it went really well. We are focused on a smooth transition, and so far I think that is going well. Our chair is here. He's been on the job just a couple of weeks, but he is here as well. And so we're optimistic about what we can do with that new authority.
And great, and I appreciate that. Did the long-term plans include a consideration for rising interest rates?
So yes,
and its impact on new bond issuances.
Yes, so Mr. Chair, sorry. Yes, it does. So it includes even future capital needs that we have, like I'm describing the $954 million in capital needs. So it's contemplating everything over the next 2 years of what we anticipate, and then in that we're going to reduce our net debt by $315 million, even with those capital improvements and other things that we anticipate to invest in over the next 10 years.
Now, I understand the plan included a deferment of some capital cost and included grants. Where were the grants coming from, and what capital projects got deferred past the 10-year plan?
So, Mr. Chair, anything that's out toward the end of the 10-year window is less certain in terms of what precisely we're going to be investing in and what we're improving. And so, again, what I did was made a decision that we're not going to have that whole $1.3 billion set aside. We're going to trim that down to $954. That isn't related to specific deferments. It's really more related to anticipated costs that we have coming forward, but not like a identified project or anything of that nature.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Mr. Mayor, the monies with regard to the Reichert House, you said that project, that went on, you said, for 30 years, and it was under the police department?
That is correct.
Okay, and the Auditor General stated that the issue with and why it's closed is one, we no longer operate that, but that and that it had no ability to compel the production of the records from the Reichert House. And so I'm wondering, why can't the city obtain a court order to produce these records?
Mr. Chair, I feel like I've given you the information that I'm able to give you. I'm happy to ask our city attorney to come forth and explain his memo.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney.
Sure. Okay. Go.
Yep.
You're recognized.
Mr. Chair, Daniel Neely, City Attorney. I think we might be
See you
conflating.
again.
Good to see you,
Thanks
sir.
for coming.
No, absolutely. Anything we can do, believe me. I think we might be conflating two different issues. The finding eight, I believe it was, that was deemed corrected deals with funds from outside the city entities. These aren't city dollars. Never were city dollars. That's the documents that we can't compel them to produce to us because, one, they're of a certain age, and two, they aren't our documents. I don't know if the documents even exist, and it isn't city dollars. As to any GPD funds, police department funds that were expended, I don't know that there is an issue as to any difficulty in accounting for those. I'm not aware of that.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a question?
Senator.
Thanks. I remember reading an article, and I want to apologize in this forum for the very first time because I'm incredibly transparent and candid. I did not return a few of your phone calls this summer because I do not believe in interfering with the judicial process, a separate branch of government. I wish some other branches would have that same respect for autonomy for us. So I want to apologize in advance. It wasn't anything personal. I just like the process to play out the way it should be, knowing we'd have today to do that. I do have to ask you, though, I remember reading an article not too long ago that said there'd be a cost savings to the city of Gainesville of upwards, I think, of $1,250,000 a year by the closing of the Reichert House, and that 15 FTEs would somehow and promptly the city would work to find placement for those people to land. So, where were the paychecks for the 15 FTEs coming from? Was it the city of Gainesville, DBA, Reichert House? I mean, how were those people getting paid if it was assumed to A, save money for the city by no longer having those employees, and B, you were looking to place them with employment, so were they not city employees, even though it was being run by the police department?
You're right.
Sure. Senator Pizzo, the folks who ran Reichert House were city employees.
Okay.
As part of the 125.5 positions who were eliminated, the folks who were filled positions, more than 50 of those, we made every effort to find them placement within open city positions otherwise. In other words, if we had 50 positions and we were cutting 50 people loose, rather than just saying, thanks for your service, we said, let us help you find other things you might be qualified to do in our organization, rather than us reaching outside the organization to fill those positions. But if it's okay, I'd like to ask our city manager to speak to that, because I can't tell you how proud I am of the effort that she and her departments made to find positions for those folks instead of just saying, thanks very much, see you later. If it's okay, I'd like to ask her to speak to that.
Okay, city manager. Yeah, did you have a follow-up to the mayor before?
Not to the mayor. I'll ask the city manager.
Ms. Curry, you're recognized.
Thank you, sir. Senator Pizzo, the Reichert House did represent almost $1.5 million of reduction when we did reduce our budget, about 15 employees. Those positions were eliminated. And so that was a savings. We did have vacancies throughout the city. Mm-hmm. Several of the Reichert House employees were employed in those positions throughout the city. Some maintained positions in the police department, but some of them did actually did not have a position as of October 1.
So I just have two quick questions, right. Sort of, and I don't think the situation might be unique to you guys. So there are a number of legacy 501c3s, quasi not-for-profit, quasi government extension programs that are just been on everyone's books that just get approved dollars over the years. And I will tell you, this happens in Miami-Dade, it happens in Broward. I can tell you directly, nobody wants to sort of like disturb or disrupt that. There's friendships and relationships, I would call it cronyism, and it's just the way things go when you don't upset those people. Is that what was going on with Reichert House? I mean, on a dollar-for-dollar basis with 60 kids, that's a 4-to-1 staff-to-kid ratio at $20,000 a kid. That's, more than twice what we spend on public education dollars per kid. Let me ask it this way, because for me it's rhetorical. Closing down, starting anew, starting from scratch, using best practices, you could probably run a more effective and efficient and cost-effective model, yes or no?
Yes, and that was the conclusion that I reached in the recommendation to the commission as to why we did close the Reichert House. And the funds that we are referring to, for the most part, are funds that were donated. They were sponsored, for example, through the Community Foundation, North Central Florida Community Foundation. They had a specific fund that people who wanted to donate donated to. And for specific things at the Reichert House, there may have been a request to the foundation to use those funds, but the foundation controlled those funds. And the reference to 2015, 16, 17, and 18 are references to not-for-profits who supported the Reichert House outside of the city.
Understood. And then my last question is, respectfully to Chair Caruso's point, I'm sure if we actually got those financials and got those records, we would find crazy inflated prices, costs of things that should, that we could probably get better prices on and all that stuff. But then again, it was for kids. We're talking about minors, right?
Yes.
Before we start asking and digging into records, we're talking about minors.
Yes, we are.
Involved in likely area, neighborhood, gun violence and other issues that may have sought refuge.
Need support and guidance. Young people who need support and guidance, still in high school, some in middle school.
So I know I said it was the last question. You probably don't like the way or how much it costs and how it was run. And if you had your druthers, you would start over and start from scratch as well, wouldn't you?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mayor, the city has $250,000 in its budget for a similar program, correct?
Likely to be similar, but I can't tell you exactly.
Not to be run by city employees.
That's correct. But I don't know who's going to apply for that program. We haven't put it on the street yet.
Right. So, and I got two questions, two more questions on this. If it was run by city employees, how can we not have the records that the Auditor General was looking for? And second, will the city contractually obligate this new entity to provide all the records on quarterly or whatever basis, so that we have an accounting and a production of records that we can verify that they're doing what they should be doing with the money we're giving them?
So I would say two things to that, Mr. Chair. First, yes, any new program that we put out on the street, we would list the reporting requirements as part of that. Going back to 2015, I can't tell you because I wasn't around what strings were put on donations made to one not-for-profit to be used potentially at Reichert House or at another nonprofit. I can't speak to that because I don't know. With more detail, I would refer back to the manager's office.
If I might, Mr. Chair.
Yes, you recognize.
So the Reichert House program actually has been audited 3 times. It was audited twice, I believe, before the State Auditor General came in. And so the audit was problematic twice before the state auditor came in. Coming into the city, reviewing the program, looking at the cost, benefit ratio, it was clear that it was not a program that the city needed to be in the business of providing. And so hence the recommendation to close it.
I just don't want this to be the same song with a different title. That's all.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Believe me, I don't want to hear that song again either. So what we had to do when we shut this down, we took the recommendation of the city manager, and it's actually her purview to shut it down. She didn't need our approval, but she sought to make sure that we were aware and that we knew about it. This was not without community concern. So I absolutely want to make sure that we don't let a future commission inherit a flawed process from this point forward, because I've been through those flawed processes right here in front of y'all. And I would like to make sure that I button it up for people 10 and 20 and 30 years down the road, while making sure that we serve those young people who absolutely need to be served in our community.
Okay, great. Let's see. Oh yeah. Are you a strong mayor? by definition? Not strong.
I can't give him a bench. I don't know. Sorry. We are a legislative mayor system.
Okay, great. And you operate based on a charter.
That's correct, sir.
Okay. And what are the what's the responsibilities of the mayor or the commission? You're under that charter.
Well, there are a variety of responsibilities, Mr. Chair. I'm happy to read it to you if you like. I don't want to misspeak. Matter of fact, it's probably better for the city attorney to do that rather than me speaking on behalf of the charter.
Okay.
I vote as the other 6 city commissioners vote as the directly elected mayor. I set agendas. I issue proclamations on behalf of the city. And on behalf of my own office. We are responsible for the charter officers of the city, previously responsible for 6 charter officers of the city, now responsible for 5. We hire and fire them. We do not hire and fire below the charter level. And, you know, we are responsible for the charters and for the budget and for joyous occasions such as this.
Can we hear from Mr. Nee?
Sure.
As to the responsibilities of the commission?
Yes, sir. Yeah, the city, Mr. Chair, the city of Gainesville is a manager-council form of government. Legislative matters are governed by the city commission. Operationally, we have 6 charter officers that carry out the operations of the city of Gainesville. There are specified powers in the charter of the commission within Article 2 of our charter, Article 3 describing the charter officers. I misspoke. Well, it's interesting. Traditionally, there have been 6 charter officers in the city of Gainesville. We now have 5 Article 3 charter officers, and the general manager for utilities position is still founded within our charter. It's now in Article 7. So technically, we still have 6 charter officers, but we have 5 Article 3 charters and 1 Article 7 charter. The authority of the commission, if you picture all of the governing authority of the municipal corporation that is the city of Gainesville, it used to be governed atop legislatively by a city commission. That has now been changed by special act of our legislature to pull off the governing authority over the utility systems, the fictitious name of which is Gainesville Regional Utilities. It's still the city. So all governing authority over the utility systems is now controlled by the Gainesville Regional Utilities Authority, whereas the rest of the governing power still remains with the city commission. Noteworthy, though, part of the growing pains that we'll be going through is that the special act from House Bill 1645 that amended our charter, creating Article 7, provided for these distinctions of governance, but also ensured that all property owned by the utility systems remains titled in the city. Any property that might be obtained by the authority if they were to use eminent domain power is titled in the name of the city. All the utility system employees remain City of Gainesville employees. All liabilities, all debt owed that is premised upon repayment by revenues from the utility system is still City of Gainesville debt. We have one City of Gainesville still, but we have 2 governing authorities. And that's what we'll be going through in the next months, I presume, maybe longer, maybe shorter, is reconciling the different portions of our charter. And that's what our duty is, and that's what our privilege is, to make sure that it works going forward. Well,
with that being said, and I understand this new relationship is a little awkward at this point. Does a city commissioner or the mayor have the authority to direct the charter officers under the city charter?
Those are the only employees they would have the ability to direct.
Individually or as a group, based on the vote?
But as a group, correct. Yeah,
as
individual,
a group based on vote.
Individual commissioners only function as one of the body of the 7. It's the commission that would have the authority. I apologize. You're right.
In fact, I was reading, let's see, in the Auditor General report, it says the general manager for utilities is responsible for the efficient administration of the GRU and has exclusive management jurisdiction and control over the operating and financial affairs of the GRU. Is that correct?
That is now in Article 7, correct. But but the CEO/general manager, as it's now called, reports to the GRU authority as its governing body.
And the general manager has control over, what does they say, operating and financial affairs.
Correct.
Right. And the city commissioners have the ability to hire or fire this general manager for utilities.
No longer.
No longer.
One of the effect of House Bill 1645 as it
Right.
I mean,
prior to 1645.
Prior to July 1st, yes, the city commission could remove and replace the general manager as one of those 6 Article 3 charter officers. Just as they could meet, for example, the city manager, our equal opportunity director, and our city auditor.
Okay. Then
city clerk.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Nee. I'm looking at a letter from dated May 11th. So this is pre-1645 by the CFO of the GRU, Ms. Resnick. She writes, she says that on January 3rd, there was an RFP issued for new money for capital needs to be issued during the month of April 2023. And if I'm wrong anywhere along the way, let me know. The lowest cost bank, Barclays, replied to the RFP and offered a direct purchase for approximately $150 million in proceeds at 2.448%, which was a variable rate. On March 15th, Mayor, the letter says that on March 15th, the GRU was directed by Mayor Ward to hold the request for approval for the debt issuance until after the legislature ended on May 5th, and to bring new money debt issuance to the commission in June. The GRU Finance notified each member of the commission that this directive had been made by a member of the commission. I understand that the GRU called, that you had reached out to the GRU and told them to hold on this money, and then on May 10th, Barclays said that they indicated they may be withdrawing their offer. When the issuance finally happened, it cost the city $2.9 million extra. And I'd like you to comment as to why did you reach out to the GRU and hold up the issuance of the bond, which was supposed to be issued in April of 2023?
Mr. Chair, I'm happy to respond to that. First of all, I did not reach out to GRU management. They walk the halls when they do this sort of thing. They go to the mayor and each commissioner.
They said you directed them.
So I am at a loss as to what made. I've seen that letter.
Okay.
And I'm at a loss to why the CFO would have said direct. I have no capacity to direct. It is my habit to say I am one vote when asked a question. Should we do this? Should we not do this? By management in meetings, and with all of our charters, my practice is to say I am one vote. Here's how I would move forward with that if I were asked to vote on it. In that particular instance, we were in the process of putting together a debt plan. You all were in the process of discussing a sea change to the way in which we operate. I did not believe that it was prudent or honest for us to represent to lending agencies exactly where we were, because we did not know exactly where we were.
Well, we knew where we were at that moment. We just didn't know where we were going because of the pending legislation.
Yes, sir, that is correct.
I'll read to you. It says on March 15th, 2023, GRU was directed by Mayor Ward to hold the request for approval for the debt issuance until after the state legislative session ended on May 5th, and to bring the new money debt issuance to the commission in June of 2023.
Mr. Chair, if I might, I will repeat that I do not have the capacity to direct. I don't direct. I tell staff, I am one of 7 votes. Here's what I would do if you brought that forward.
So you're saying this letter's incorrect?
That is correct, sir. I am saying that I did not direct anyone to do anything because I do not have the capacity to do that.
Did you reference in any manner to the GRU that maybe we should hold off on this?
Yes, for the reasons that I just said, sir, that I feel is that it would have been imprudent and dishonest even for us to move ahead with that at that point, knowing that we were in the process of creating a debt repayment plan at the time, and that you all were contemplating a sea change in the way that the utilities operated. I can't tell you more than that, sir.
Okay, but even though they indicated to you that this could cost us a lot of money?
Oh,
because that's what the letter goes on to say.
I'm happy to address that as well, Mr. Chair, that yes, we had a discussion about the potential of interest rates rising. We did not have a discussion about, oh, Barclays will pull out if we do this. The advice that I was given is it's possible that interest rates could rise. That's not what cost us additional money, sir. What cost us additional money was that the leading respondent pulled out because of all the things that were going on at the time. And that's really all I can tell you, sir.
Okay. I'm still, I think we all started this whole thing last year or last session. And I asked you to come back with and make bold actions, take bold moves. I didn't expect you to come back with a 29% property tax increase and put your problem on the backs of the taxpayers. I was hoping we would come back with a reduced budget for the city. And with property, you raised the millage almost a whole percent. And, by raising property taxes 29%, and I think, we already have elevated GRU rates. I'll be honest with you, I'm disappointed in the bold actions that you think you took. What was the budget last year? And what is the budget this year going forward?
Mr. Chair, I would, to answer your question, it was 155 point something million the previous year. It's 156 point something this year. Members of your committee in the last JLAC meeting admonished us to significantly raise our property taxes by as much as a mill, I believe was the actual quote. We did as we were instructed, sir. I do not enjoy paying higher property taxes. I do not enjoy passing those on to my community. But we need to deliver value and run our government in a way that continues to work. We chose to take a $19 million reduction in revenue out of a $155 million budget at the time, 156 going into this year and change. That feels like a bold move to me, but bold is subjective.
It is subjective. I understand the city manager took a pay cut of 5%. Any other, I don't even know, what do the commissioners make?
Commissioners make approximately $40,000 a year. I make about $52,000 a year. We rolled back a significant pay increase for the commission that had been approved the previous year.
And the charter officers, what do they typically make?
The charter officers make anywhere from $308 at the high end to about 160 or so at the bottom end.
Did any of those charter officers take pay cuts?
The city manager offered a pay cut.
I know that. Did any of the other charter officers?
No, sir.
No. Did they get a pay raise?
There were, let's see, it's a complicated situation because we had interim charter officers going into the year. As we agreed to permanent contracts, there were increases in the position given.
See, I just don't see any cuts here. I see non-funding of positions that weren't filled, but I don't see any real major cuts in the overall budget at all. In fact, it went up a little bit. And if we were taking bold actions, I'm a CPA. I go in for a workout of a corporation. It's okay. We got to cut costs, people. We've got this much revenue coming in, and we've got this much expenses. So we've got to cut costs and bring things in line. And first thing I do is I look at salaries. I look at fixed cost and try to get rid of all that. I just don't. One second. I just don't see that those are bold actions. But when you actually increase your budget, I don't see that as a bold action at all. I'm very disappointed, and I'll let Vice Chair.
And I would love to respond to that as well after this.
Do you remember, I think Rep. Hart was going to ask you the same question. Do you remember, I think the alternative was raise a millage or, you're certainly not going to go out and issue any more bonds, but do you remember who told you that you should raise a millage rate?
I wouldn't want to go into that, and I don't have the list in front of me.
Mr. Chair, can we hear from Ms. Sue Wang?
Sure. Ms. Wang? You're the Director of Finance?
Yes, Mr. Chair.
Okay, you're recognized.
Thank you.
How long have you been in that position, Ms. Wang?
15 months.
Okay. You're pretty familiar with how the budget and the operation of the city is now split up on a numbers basis?
I would think so.
I'm inviting you up because math usually has one right answer. That's why we can just get right to data. What percentage of the city's budget, let's say, is for police and fire for life safety? Do you know? Or how many millions of dollars?
I think I need the support from Ms. Curry's book. But typically it's about 60% for public safety. Yes.
50 or 60% of your
50%. Yes.
50% of your 155 million, so about $77.5 million of your $155 million budget goes to police and fire.
Correct.
Okay. So left to take, and nobody up here is advocating, I would imagine none of my colleagues are advocating for cutting police and fire services, salaries, right? We all want their endorsements around campaign time. That leaves the other 50% remaining from operations to make these drastic cuts that we asked you guys to do, right? So to be fair, 100% of the city operations and revenue in the budget is not really available to be cut, just 50% of it. So out of that $77.5 million, where are some of the other larger expenses as representing part of the budget? Just looking to see where we can cut from.
That would be public works. We have parks, but we did cut a lot of parks programs.
Do you know how much in a sense of dollars?
It's a couple of $1 million.
So 1% to 2% of your budget. Well,
correct.
Really reflective of the 50% that was going to be eligible. Probably 4 to 5% of your parks budget was cut.
Correct. Yeah.
How about public works? You eliminated 10 FTEs from public works. Okay, and what are you running, about $80,000 per head on an FTE?
Approximately.
So you saved about $800,000+ on public works. What else?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Cynthia Curry.
Mm-hmm.
So we have public works, we have parks, and we have our transportation department. Even though a significant number of our transportation department positions are federally funded, we still had to cut 40 because they have a subsidy. We cut 40 vacant positions from our transportation department.
Of your 1,496 or 97 full-time employees, how much are police and fire?
Oh, wow. I am going to estimate, because I don't have the exact numbers right now, but I would say about 350 positions, probably.
350 positions are accounting for 50% of your budget.
I really would need to just
Gotcha.
take a look at my numbers. I don't want to misquote. I don't have that number right away. But I will, if I might be given the liberty, let me just say a few things if I might.
You can get back to him also on that issue.
Okay.
Okay.
I'd like to, if I might, just add.
Go ahead.
We took a $19 million reduction based on the general fund transfer reduction from GRU. In our police and fire department, we had to true them up because what normally happens is at the end of the year, they run under, and we utilize any funds that have been left over from other general fund departments
Backfill.
to make them whole. And so what we did this year when we budgeted was we did an accurate budget for our police and fire department to make sure that they were protected. And in order to do that, we had to sacrifice from parks, from public works, from transportation, and from any other city general funded department in order to make our police and fire departments whole in terms of their overtime, which was generally trued up at the end of the year, and to make sure that they were fully funded for any collective bargaining increases, and they were significant.
Which I would put to you that you should have.
And so therefore, for those two departments, they were approximately $10 million in excess, both of those, over what they were budgeted in the prior year.
Those other charter positions that the chair had asked Mr. Mayor about, those are also contracted positions. So they have a lot, they're not sort of 1 year, one-off contracts. They actually have presumably an escalator built into the contract of what their pay raise is over a period of time, or no? No? Do they follow any kind of cost of living or CPI or anything in adjustment, or no?
We do not. We do not, as a rule, automatically add to that. We have a discussion every year when we evaluate the positions.
Okay.
Thank you. Chair, 1 second. I just thought of something. Mr. Mayor, you said that you were not directed by, that you did not direct the GRU. I just remembered we've got Mr. Cunningham here, and if I could ask him to come back up. Okay, we'll get to your final question. Mr.
Yes, sir,
Cunningham,
Mr. Chair, Mr. Cunningham.
were you, on March 15, 2023, were you directed by the mayor to hold the request for approval, or approval for the debt issuance until after state legislative session ended on May 5th?
So, Mr. Chair, my recollection is we were in a meeting at GRU where the mayor said something along the lines of it'd be difficult to issue debt based on coming out of the JLAC meeting and the request for a debt reduction plan. Prior to having that plan in place, it would be difficult to issue debt.
Wasn't the debt already, wasn't it ready for issuance? Wasn't Barclays like, we're ready to close?
So we were at a place, we had start work in November. It was coming up. We had start work in November, putting out a bid, selected Barclays in, I believe it's in January. And so we were ready to bring it for that approval by the city commission.
Right.
But we were also in the middle of, we needed to approve, we didn't have our debt reduction plan identified or approved yet.
What was the motivation for holding off then? I mean, it's March.
Right.
We're ready to roll. We know it's going to close in April. It's ready. It's all proved.
Right.
And what would be the motivation to hold off on that money? You needed the money to replace other debt that was terminating.
Correct, Mr. Chair. Yes. So we did need that funding as part of our capital improvement plan, but we also had not approved a debt reduction plan or brought a debt reduction plan to the city commission yet. So those two things were in play simultaneously. That clarifies that. Okay,
I just we understood that costs were going to go up. We didn't, if the feds raised the interest rates.
Yeah, we knew there was a possibility, and we had shared that with all commissioners on one-on-one, but had not brought that to the board as an item.
Did all the commissioners direct you in the same manner as the mayor on a one-on-one basis?
I would characterize it as they all agreed to not bring the item forward until we had a debt reduction plan.
Okay. And did you, when going to these the commissioners one-on-one, did you let them know that other commissioners were in favor of doing that? Holding off?
Yeah, all we shared was that a commissioner, one of the folks on the board, had requested that, and we shared that with each of them. And again, in the context of we didn't have a debt reduction plan in place, and we were looking at issuing more debt.
And then the plan you came up with seems, didn't really, it seemed insufficient or inadequate at best. And how would that have affected the plan? How would that have affected this issuance?
Right.
Whether you had the plan or didn't have the plan, what effect on the issuance does it have? And the fact that you've got debt, you have to retire certain debt,
right,
and on a certain date, that didn't change, and you needed this bond in order to do that. That didn't change. So what would a plan or no plan matter at that point?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, so what we did in the plan, so let me just kind of go forward. What we did in the plan was contemplate future borrowings over that 10-year period. So with that plan, including this particular borrowing, we included that and other borrowings in the 10-year plan to determine the buy down of $315 million in net debt reduction. So we contemplated that along with other borrowings in the debt reduction plan and got that approved by the commission.
That's fine, but how did the plan affect this issuance of $150 million of bonds?
So I would say the plan didn't affect it. The plan,
it didn't.
So I would say
that's fine. It didn't affect it at all. So to hold just put the city at risk for higher interest rates and an increased cost of this bond, correct? Yes or no?
It did in this case.
It did.
Yes.
It did. And we pretty much knew interest rates were going to go up. The Fed had been threatening it. Not threatening. They said they were going to do it, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So it just boggles the mind that knowing we have to do this, we put it off knowing that we would pay more money for it. Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going off of one of Senator Pizzo's question, but now that you brought this up, I've got that too. Senator Pizzo's, we'll stay with this until I can come back to the city manager or the mayor. As part of this, again, I think this is pretty obvious that there are some manipulations that are going on, that this is not the most prudent thing. And so I want to go back to this committee's ability to start to enforce and to promote. To claim that there was no influence and then to have somebody come up and say, well, but maybe somebody suggested some things, and to have this bifurcated structure leads to bad governance. It's just a more expensive bond issue, period. So that's my comment. But the other question was whether or not the city of Gainesville made an expensive salary adjustment recently that was in the news, and so I'm wondering if whether the DEI person is a charter employee, and what was the impetus for voting for a $37,000 pay increase in this environment. And so whoever wants to answer that can. Thank you.
Anybody like that? Mayor?
So which one of those items would you like me to?
Let's address the $37,000 increase.
Sure, I'm happy to address that, Mr. Chair. The Office of Equity and Inclusion, which is technically in our charter the Equal Opportunity Officer, goes back many, many years. It's not new. Prior to many of the discussions we're having, we did a salary survey across the nation and compared what our Equal Opportunity Officer does in the city of Gainesville, which is a very broad range of responsibilities that has grown over the last several years. And that was the midpoint of salary for a similar position. Although there really are no similar positions, because what we ask of that job is more than any other city that we could find. So we're asking that person to do more than other cities do with that position. yet we still chose the midpoint for that position nationally.
And at that point, members, I'm going to have to cut off. We've got members of the public that want to speak. And I want to thank you, Mayor, for coming up here today, along with City Manager Curry and City Attorney Nee. If we could, I got a time limit, so I appreciate it. So we're going to have the public come. The first one, Angela Castile, wishes to speak, and Ms. Castile, I'm going to have to limit you to 1 minute in order to get. We've got to get this meeting completed by the half hour.
Yes, sir. So, thank you, Chair Caruso, Senator Pizzo, all of JLAC members, and the Auditor General. Many customers for years have been crying out for help, thanks to you all bringing things to light with the audit that took several years due to COVID. As it seemed the city was dragging their feet, and thanks to the recent bill, we as a community have been heard. It is obvious that it will take a bit to correct that which needs correcting, but this audit brought much to light, and the bill got things going in the right direction. I and thousands of other customers of the utility thank you. I also would like to thank the Auditor General. Another thing, they didn't want to move forward with the bond issuance, but in September, they did the final reading to raise our rates for GRU. How does that make sense? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Castile. Next up, Jim Konish, a GRU ratepayer. Sorry, you got 1 minute, sir.
Mr. Chair, Jim Konish, thank you for your consideration of this matter. Actions speak louder than words. As soon as 1645 became law, $500,000 was given to the Ackerman law firm to file a lawsuit across the street that was found to be devoid of merit. There are parallel citizen suits in federal court and across the street suing the city and the governor, trying to nullify 1645. I'd like to know if the city attorney is defending the suit or helping the plaintiff sue the governor. There's a history of these people trying to nullify what Representative Perry did. Representative Hinson Rawls joined a suit to prevent a referendum on reform of GRU governance that wasn't even considered before the referendum failed. There are irregularities throughout the budget. The budget is full of political, social, and ideological interests, contrary to the charter.
Wrap it up, Mr.
And also, a GRU is going to provide $1.1 million of free county street lighting pursuant to a tradition that has existed for decades.
I understand that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. James Engel. It's going to be followed by Armando Grundy Gomes and Amy Trask. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name's James Engel. Wanted to come, I'm a ratepayer in Gainesville myself. Yes. Wanted to come and speak on behalf of my city. Gainesville's a great place. Having seen this new administration come in, inheriting a mess, and seeing the steps they've taken, every point in the audit has been either fixed or partially addressed, and I think they're on the right path for that. I can tell you the difference you can see in the city and actually being there and walking the streets and being familiar with what goes on there doesn't all come out in the numbers, but I can tell you that that me and many other people that wish they could be here are very happy with our city government and are glad to see them moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Mr. Armando Grundy Gomez?
Take your pick, insert here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple of things I want to talk about. For one, the questions of coming forth about who directed what to whom and what money was spent. You all are smart folks. If you're a CPA, have an MPA, it doesn't take rocket science to know when you have a structural budget deficiency and more is going out than what's coming in, you have a problem. Coming from Jacksonville, Florida, and one of my good friends over here, whom I know from the superintendent's office she and I know about some structural budget deficiencies with JEA. When you have people that are spending money at high levels and positions, and I'll be cognizant of time, it's not rocket science. They're top heavy. Person making $190,000, the city manager was one of the highest paid city managers in the state. It's not rocket science, folks. It's a structural budget deficiency.
Thank you.
What you read is right. Look at the numbers. There's nothing bold about it. It's not bold.
Thank you.
It's a trick. It's a shell game.
Amy Trask. Amy Trask. You're recognized. 1 minute.
Thank you for allowing me to speak here today. First, I'd like to thank our city of Gainesville for doing what they've been doing to mitigate the damages that we are now facing, and to our mayor, Harvey Ward, for everything that he has done to be a beacon of light during these really dark times. I have a concern that our state is prescribing solutions to local problems and providing no assurances to us that our voices and our vote have worth. It's the first time in Florida history that a municipal utility board has been appointed by a governor, and this representation without consent is concerning because it feels like it's unconstitutional, and it's a violation of our social contract. With that being said, our commissioners inherited this problem. They didn't cause it, and they're still doing everything they can to mitigate this. And so my concern that I'd like to ask directly is if we continue to cooperate with this board, if we continue to show outstanding progress, if this board would be willing to vocalize support for us to reclaim ownership of our regional utility board that we voted to keep.
Thank you, Ms. Trask.
Thank you.
Ms. Kristen Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, representatives and senators. My name is Kristen Young. This is the first time I've spoken in Tallahassee. I'm no local government, far better, but I felt it was really important for you not to hear from activists, not to hear from single focus individuals, but to hear from a common person who pays attention to local government and who wants to see local government succeed. I'm a great admirer of Ms. Curry. She's come in and really listened to the concerns here and made huge changes with the city of Gainesville. And it has responded to the JLAC concerns and audit and made bold steps. Quickly, I did not come up here. I work in nonprofit, and I've seen how the rigorous steps that nonprofits now have to go through the city of Gainesville to gain RFPs, and it's very rigorous, and I think it will continue with record house-like situations. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Young. Okay, the chair calls on Representative Gossett-Seidman for a motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm very concerned about the audit findings and the regards to the city of Gainesville. I feel while they may have made some attempts in resolving the issue, some were perfunctory and do not adequately address the real issue. Therefore, I would like to make a motion to request the Auditor General to perform a follow-up audit of all the matters of the audit report. Second, I would like for the Auditor General to investigate why the bond issue was delayed and investigate the resulting almost $3 million of additional costs. In doing this, we'd be asking the Auditor General to confirm all the actions and interactions of the mayor, the city commissioners, city manager, and the manager of the GRU, and any other members of the GRU. This should include a review of all communications between the parties for purposes of seeing the city charter was violated, if it was, or if the sunshine laws were violated. In both of these requests, we request the Auditor General to carry out the audit with a provision that the audit-related concerns of Chair Caruso and the committee are considered. Thank you.
Mr. Chair?
Okay. They're not needing a second. Are there questions?
Yeah, there's a question.
Go ahead.
Representative respectfully just read from a typewritten prepared statement, which presumably, unless there's a printer here on the desk I don't see, was created and drafted prior to this meeting where we had findings and a presentation. So those feelings and that sentiment was held by either representative or the chair or somebody else prior to this meeting with no opportunity whatsoever for the presentation given here, the answers in good faith, and the questions being asked and posed here in good faith to overcome any suspicion or to find something perfunctory. A typewritten prepared statement was just read into the record on a motion. So is
there a question?
What are we doing? What are we doing?
Representative.
Thank you, Senator. I served 5 years on a city commission, and I have very strong feelings that there were sunshine violations here in the past actions of the Commission of Gainesville.
Are there any other questions? Members?
Can I have a follow-up?
If we can make it quick, Representative.
Sure. Representative,
Senator.
Is that your typewritten statement that you prepared prior to this meeting?
It is prepared by me and Representative Caruso because of my major concerns with these violations of the Sunshine Law.
There being no other questions, Sabrina, would you?
We do.
We have a question.
Yes. Thank you.
Representative Benjamin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to possible sunshine violations, and this recommendation is for a continued audit. What's the parameters of this particular audit? Is it going to address these sunshine issues? Do they have the ability to address sunshine violations?
Yeah, you may answer that, Representative.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, sir, there are several dimensions of the Sunshine Law which do not provide that members of a commission or council of a municipality may be, in fact, basically requesting their position on an action prior to the action taken. That is considered a very strong violation. It's like taking one position and going down the row and seeking what result they might have. And secondly, if a mayor or a commissioner were to be in a meeting of a GRU or another official capacity, they would have to be noticed as prior to the meeting for 2 weeks as having appearing in an official capacity and presenting their opinions.
Okay. Sabrina, would you please call the roll?
Representative Benjamin?
No.
Senator Broder?
Yes.
Senator Davis? No. Senator DeSegli, excused. Representative Gossip Simon?
Yes.
Representative Hart?
No.
Senator Simon? Yes. Representative Plakin?
Yes.
Representative Yurkowski? Yes. Vice Chair Pizzo? Nope. Chair Caruso?
Yes.
6 yeas and 4 nays.
With that, the motion is adopted. Is there any other business before the committee? No. We have, let me see. We've got 1 minute.
I know we've taken a vote, committee, and it was already identified that we had a pre-printed statement, but I have to let this committee know that the gentleman brought up JEA. And yes, if anyone's been through this, I have in Jacksonville. And we were talking about looking at an example of a government that came before us doing what we asked them to do. I think this is offensive. I think what we just did here is very offensive. And I think that what we just asked the Auditor General's office to do is really out of their purview. And so I just wanted to make sure that we knew what we were doing. And I am so moved to take a minute, the last minute of this committee, to tell you how offensive I am as to what we just did to a government who obviously, yes, they're working. Things were corrected. We have partial things that are not done, but they're working toward doing better. And that's what I remember making that statement in the last committee meeting we had. You need to do better by your constituents. You need to do better by the people living in your community. And they brought what they had to show us that they're doing what the Auditor General's office said to them, and here we are punishing them.
I've got to cut you off,
Please
Senator.
do.
I appreciate
Please do,
that.
but I'm offended.
We, the purpose here was to make sure that this city has severe financial concerns with not just the city but the GRU. I've heard concerns today about whether they followed the rules of the sunshine. And based on that, I think that the auditor to continue forward and monitor what's going on there and look into these matters is warranted. And and that's where
Mr.
we
Chair,
are.
I ask that you.
With that, I've got a hard finish. It is 6:30. I mean 5:30,
But
and
none of us had an opportunity to really be able to speak because the time was taken up by the public, and it's unfair.
no, the
that we
public.
should
It's
not
always
get-
fair. The public
No,
says
I'm not
something.
saying it wasn't fair for them to speak, but it's unfair for us not to have an opportunity to speak as the legislators that are sitting here that legislated this.
I
I want to ask you for,
Representative.
one thing. Promise you.
5 seconds.
I'd like to know, would you pull that tape and see who told them to increase the millage? Because it seems to be that nobody seems to know how that came about.
With that, Representative Gossett-Seidman moves to adjourn. Any objection?